since the
It's
descent.
been 8 months,
The
hasn't
machines
it?
and those men. Who are they, Miguel?
Well, as you can see, I successfully took over Earth with me and my army. And now, here we are at the White House in Washington, D.C. Press play.
The black suits. I didn't recognize them from command or training. Miguel nodded. He understood exactly what I was alluding to. I've been thinking of just that question since the drop. Ministry of Culture and Nuclear Development. Vladimir said. Minister of Culture? The suits? What would they want with us? And why are they this far out from Moscow? I asked. Vladimir darted Mikhail a look, shrugged his massive shoulders, and went back to his book. How the steel was tempered. I looked back to my friend. Miguel, what could they want from us? Surely they have more important things to be doing. Moving some pretty heavy equipment in there. It's a dead town though, right, Miguel? Vlad? Vladimir is my name, not Vlad. His eyes never left the book. Right. Sorry. Anyway, no, I didn't notice anything really, Miguel. In an unspoken but mutual agreement, that line of inquiry was left there, unanswered. It was a strange paradox. We are trained to question, review, plan, and so forth. We were expert tools of the motherland, yet we naturally, instinctively knew when to stop asking certain questions. It is exciting, no? The training, the regime, the routine, everything for this? Mikhail's eyes lit up. I will be wearing the Ushakov if the mission is a successful one. They'll give you the Ushakov, Mikhail, when they make you for Secretary of the Union, I said. In a moment of genuine unanimity, we laughed, including Vladimir. It was brief, but I will not forget it. We finished our MREs, and we returned to our duties. As night drew in, at least from what the internal dials told us was night, we made preparations. The 5 portholes that gave us a full view surrounding the Villa 2 offered no clue to our environment. It was only due to the sensors and high tech that we could pinpoint where we were exactly, and where exactly we intended to go. The fold-out military hammocks provided comfort, while the low hue of green and blue that bounced across the tight walls was as if the vessel itself was assuring us it was healthy and intact. The slow murky ocean is a universe in its own right, its own ecosystem and life. We were but explorers, no different from our cosmonauts. Just like space, the ocean is untamed and owes no person a safe passage across, let alone down. What marine life would revolutionize our dry civilizations? Was she the new world that our society must push into? Like the brave Soviet warriors who fought the German scourge, do we need a brave band of soldiers to take what we need and create what we want? What could we bring from her like a gift to our union? We did not know. We knew we did not know. But we knew we wanted to find out. At least, we thought we did. Tomorrow, we would reach Cask Life. Red sirens awoke me. A howling alert system drowned out everything. I fell out of my hammock and looked across the chamber. Mikhail was in a flurried panic state. His glasses were slipping down his nose as he began manually overriding the system and regaining control of Villa 2. I lifted myself up and ran towards the controls. Mikhail pointed to a flurry of indicators on the board. Pressure, orange. Equilibrium, orange, stood out. I quickly realized what was happening. Villa 2 had an internal chamber and a separate exterior, like a ball within a ball. It would balance itself to the best of its ability if small adjustments had to be made during descent or ascent. In other words, we would not be thrown upside down by an underwater current. What it could not do was spin the balls in 2 entirely different motions. The portholes only showed steel, indicating the exterior ball had been completely misaligned. Villa 2 had slowly turned itself sideways, and our internal ball was straining to keep the equilibrium. If she blew the intercostal cogs in machinery, we would go dark. In a few tense minutes, Mikael and I had slowly regained control. The red blinking light stopped, and the angry orange temper of the control board subsided. We aligned the chamber doors back up and ran an automatic survey, although there was superficial damage. Vladimir pounced up, sweat pouring from his face. The behemoth had awoken. Is it the fucking Americans? He leapt towards a Makarov pistol, still in a daze. I dive-tackled him with little success, but enough to keep him out of reach of the weapon. In that brief moment, he managed to grab his breath and looked around. He fell backwards onto Mikael's hammock and quietly assessed what had just happened. Mikael let out an audible sigh of relief and looked up to the clock. It was breakfast. We are on shifts from now on. That was stupid of me to even allow this to happen, Mikael said as he directed Vladimir off of his bed. Once diagnoses were run and no main structural damage had occurred, Mikael began manually directing Villa 2. Estimation suggested that we would reach Cask Life in less than 6 hours. I reached for the documents and began analyzing the biographies of the 3 crew members we were about to meet. I did not recognize 2 of the names, Boris and Victor, but one stood out, a Moscow native by the name of Anatoly. Anatoly, nuclear specialist, engineering, Moscow. I looked at Mikael. It isn't. A grin broke the tension of Mikael's face as he ran his eyes over the crew. Ah, fuck. Anatoly. Yes, that's him. Look at the specialization in prior deployments. Our eyes dotted across the biography. Oh man, Mikael. He's going to hate it when he sees you. Do you remember basic training? Do you remember when you, Alexander, and Povetkin put that salt in his coffee? Do I fucking remember? He threw a wrench at Povetkin, nearly smashed his skull. He wasn't angry, Sergei. He was ready to kill. He didn't speak to us until specialized deployment. Sergei, what will we say when we see him? We could pretend we have no idea who he is. We could say Command said we were sent because the stowaway was on board the Cask Life. Mikael wiped tears of laughter from his face, and I burst into laughter. We could say we found out he was related to Eisenhower, and he has to return to command to answer for being a traitor of the Soyuz. No. Vladimir interrupted. Sergei and I are joking, Vladimir. Mikael rolled his eyes. No. Vladimir restated. Well argued, my friend. Do you want to tell me when you are being promoted to chief speechwriter for the General Secretary? I mocked. Vladimir's expression never so much as moved, as if we were the wind blowing past his head.
With iPrimus Internet, a Best Broadband Provider of the Year award means more than just more reliability. It means more to dream about.
Anyway, we should be at the seabed soon enough. Get yourself packed and ready. It won't be too long now, Mikael said. He went back to the controls and peered out of the blackened large porthole above the controls. I reorganized my material and read over the command instructions. Cask Life was nearing, and that meant we had 3 new crew members. At least, that is what we thought. After another few hours, the chambers began to feel smaller. The still which offered us the only protection from Mother Nature's iron grip around Villa 2 was beginning to feel as if it had developed its own sort of pressure. The air was hot, but my body felt cold. One of the things they do not prepare you for in these chambers is just how close your field of vision is to everything in your proximity. Looking out beyond the horizon, seeing the open expanse is a somewhat underrated feeling. One that I missed. Vladimir was resting and reading, as he usually does. Mikael was lethargic, readjusting dials and buttons just to keep himself busy. Sergei, I need to speak to you. I feel bad about this, but you should know. Mikael moved towards me, hand threw down some sealed folders. Read this, and if you have any questions, ask me. But I think you'll understand why we are here. looking quite confused and intrigued. I picked up the folder. I looked over to Vladimir, who had not stirred. I could tell Mikhail was serious. I began reading, page after page, diagrams, physics, and of course, marine studies. Most of it was regarding Operation Atlantis, obviously. I understood it, and it made sense to me. But then I began reading about a new operation. I read and read, never lifting my head once. After 3 hours of intense reading, I rubbed my eyes and fell back into my seat. This was not what I signed up for. The success and eventually the aims of Operation Atlantis morphed. The Cuban Missile Crisis changed everything. It spooked High Command. Once they knew the viability of the operation, the wheels of our department began spinning. Our propaganda was and is exceptional. We claimed that we cannot survive down there. That trying to go there is wasted resources. We filled journals with lies upon lies about the trenches and oceans, just like we filled books with false physics for our moon missions. These were sent out into the West to deter, slow down, and mislead their own operations. While the capitalists sifted through our findings, we, in the glow of the Soviet genius, used our real information and technology and made advances no capitalist country could even dream of. Although I had always supported the right of our government and people to resist the aggression of US imperialism, the movement of nuclear weapons near the self-determined Cuban freedom fighters was not without risk and reward. In the military boardrooms across Russia, cask life became militarily advantageous. Our science was intermixed with military research. Although non-functioning, for the moment, a small nuclear reactor was also installed in the cask life. Within the more lofty goals of living underwater as a safe and secure alternative following nuclear fallout, there was also a military aim. This second aim was to assess the viability of a manned nuclear station at the depths of the ocean. A stable nuclear silo, complete with nuclear deterrent capacity. It was in the remit of our scientific curiosity to also provide military support to the new, aptly named and secreted operation, known among the sailors and marine specialists as Operation Iron Hand. Mikhail turned and pointed at the folder. Listen, Sergei. Cask Life is the blueprint for a potential nuclear launch base, right under the noses of our enemies.
Project. You should never die in the morning. So in the morning. Well, I'll never die. Push play.
Here, Sergei leaned towards me and handed me a layout of the Cask Life.
I'm born for die.
Look, there. He pointed to something new. A large block addition. Once the crew successfully managed to live and sustain themselves, word got back to High Command about the potential for a new frontier of war. Operation Iron Hand would weaponize these life casks. Mikhail stopped talking as the vessel began shaking. Once it's calmed, he continued. Only 2 of the life zones had these nuclear reactors put into place. He pointed at a building I had never seen before. His eyes lit up, and excitement poured from his voice. A manned nuclear deterrent, hid from sight, but ready to come to our aid should we need her. No longer would weak packs with communists sympathizing Latin America be our negotiating table. We could have nuclear weapons loaded in every trench. Operation Atlantis and Operation Iron Hand would work to create a new frontier of warfare against capitalist aggression. This is part of history. We will be wearing medals by the end of this. I shook my head. Did he realize what he was saying? We weren't going to a life zone. We were going to a prototype nuclear base. Mikhail, I do not even know where to begin. This sounds incredibly dangerous. What if there's a leak on cask life? We could be walking into a death trap. No, Sergei. High Command have been getting clear radiation readings, and the reactor was completely inactive. Was? Before I could protest more, in indignation that the entire mission had been kept from me from the get-go, Vladimir sounded the warning that cask life was in view. Leaning forward, he flipped two large switches on the control board. Two massive beams of light appeared from overhead external floodlights. Mikhail and I pressed our faces against the large portholes at the bow of Villa 2 in a vain attempt to see cask life. Sure enough, as we smoothly descended towards the seafloor, a large object came into view. A massive steel dual chamber like two iron lungs. At the bow of cask life was a control chamber. Although compact, it was clearly 2 floors accessible by a small ladder. Surrounding her are high-powered beams automated on turrets. They continually provide illumination in the immediate sea is that just meters away from the 2 main chambers is the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. Apart from the invisible to human eye volcanic heat utilized by cask life, it was an abyss of pitch darkness. No life, no sound, nothingness. As I tried to envision the sheer expanse of nothingness, I picked out something that I had only just come to know existed. I saw that the nuclear reactor that had been installed. The reactor was bolted and secured close to the trench and was connected to cask life by a small tunnel. Its low red hue meant it was churning out power. A small but functioning reactor. It was massive in scale, almost twice as big as the living chambers. Radon's water surrounded and swirled around it. Mikhail had to physically secure the 2 vessels to one another. Utilizing his expertise, connecting the Villa 2 to cask life proved to be routine. Mikhail made it look easy. They were expecting us.
Had no bun.
RACQ is a different kind of insurer. One owned by Queenslanders for Queenslanders.
We stood there for what felt like forever. Although cask life was much bigger than Villa 2, I felt encased in something tight and unnatural. Yellow beams encased the steel panels, and it had a dome shape to help in the distribution of external pressure. Anatoly was a short, stout fellow with black hair. His clothing was a mess, untucked and unkempt. His skin was pale and sickly. His eyes were the only thing fresh about him. Victor beside him had not shaved, and his hair was far longer than would normally be allowed. He must have been working on something mechanical by the looks of grease and oil on his white t-shirt. On his neck was some light bruising. I didn't make anything of it. Eventually, and to my surprise, Vladimir mustered up a few words. He pointed to himself. We are crew support. High Command. You are Victor and Anatoly? He reached out his hand. Obviously, Vladimir had been studying the brief. Anatoly smiled. We are Anatoly and Victor crew support. He clasped his hand around Vladimir's. For a short and out-of-shape man, his grip was like a vice. Vladimir winced just as the grip was released. In the close proximity of Anatoly, I had wondered why he had not recognized either I or Mikhail. I decided not to press the issue. Perhaps it was a blessing he had suppressed the memories of our annoying pranks at basic training. Yet still, nothing. A glazed, yet relaxed face. It's almost as if he knew nothing of us, the mission, or even himself. That's Vladimir. I am Sergei, and this is Mikhail. High Command sent us because they were worried about you. They said they had not heard from any of you in quite some time. I said. But from the looks of it, it seems everything is fine. Is that right? Whereas, Boris? Anatoly put his fingers to his lips, indicating silence. His smile never left his face. He pointed to the second chamber to our immediate left. He gestured, coughing. He then stepped out of the way and pointed to the control chamber behind him. I nodded and squeezed by them.
Had no
We walked
bond.
past the two men and into the control chamber. The main room was like Villa 2 in the sense that it was connected to the control chamber via a tunnel. Although since Cask Life was bigger in almost every aspect, the narrowed tunnel that Villa had was more like a short corridor in Cask Life. I leaned down and inspected the sprawling complicated mess of controls, dials, switches and buttons. Numerous lights flickered and emitted low electrical hums. Then, I saw the communication box. To my shock, it was irreparably damaged. Wires were cut, dials were cracked. It appeared as if someone had tried to rip it out in a frenzy of anger or despair. I pointed to it. Mikael leaned down, catching his glasses as they slipped down his nose. He frowned. Something was not right. Our intuitions kicked in immediately. We must not let on that anything is unusual. Not until we get to the bottom of this mystery. At, coincidentally, the bottom of the ocean. Vladimir readjusted his belt. I saw he had the Makarov pistol from earlier. Mikael turned towards the two crew members. This makes sense why you guys weren't saying much to High Command. I have seen it before. Let me guess. He pointed to the fire extinguishers concealed in the two compartments above our heads. One must have fallen and smashed off of it. Victor threw his hands up in the air, and Anatoly laughed. He laughed and laughed. Then, he went quiet, and his gaze turned to a quiet, unrelenting stare. Whether there was an affirmation of Mikael's hypothesis was unclear. Either way, we knew that this was of design, and not an accident. Fire extinguishers don't leave the appearance of clawing. I knew from my own studies of prototype life zones that the isolated and enclosed environment can lead people to mental fatigue. Perhaps being down here for such an extended period of time had scrambled their ability to interact normally. Nonetheless, those types of people are the last ones who should be near a nuclear reactor. Mikael took out a small layout of the electricity lines from his jacket and began wandering around the interior of the main chamber, trying to piece together the electrical infrastructure. He buried his head into his small blue map and began tinkering with the wires underneath the damaged communications. Water. Victor pointed to the supply sling around a large mess table behind him at the stern of the vessel. A large plastic white table with multiple small tools. There, in between the clothes, tools and magazines, were some pristine glasses of water. No, I'm quite alright, thank you, I said. Vladimir, who was the closest of our crew to the table, picked up a small cup and drank. He nodded thankfully, and then wandered into the second chamber that Anatoly had pointed to. Shortly after, he stormed back out and right back up to the ladder to Villa 2. A few awkward moments of silence later, a large bag crashed down onto the steel floor. This startled Mikael, and he banged his head on the underside of the controls. Vladimir climbed down the ladder, lifted his rucksack over his shoulder. Sick, Vladimir growled as he walked past us. Vladimir is a health professional. It's probably best to check on Boris right away, I assured him. I wasn't long after him. Anything was better than this stolid, protracted staring, I thought. The second chamber was the sleeping quarters. 6 beds, 2 washrooms. 3 of the beds appeared used, and one of those was in current use. There was Boris. He was sweating profusely. His eyes were reddened, and his skin was pale with thick blue veins pulsating across his neck and forehead. Before I got too near to the bed, Vladimir grabbed my arm quickly. He produced 2 oxygen masks from his rucksack behind him. It seems that High Command was worried about a gas leak within Cask Life. I didn't protest. They would do as a protective measure against whatever it was that had infected Boris. Vladimir leaned in, taking a very cautious approach. He checked vitals and felt his pulse. If you had asked me, I would have hazarded a claim that I could almost hear his heart pounding against his ribcage. I looked down at the mess that was Boris. Boris? Boris? Can you hear me? I slapped his arm.
Poor Dad. Head to bed. Another day. See you in the morning. Another day. Let's go outside this time. Why not? Crows. There we are. Stairs. Bathroom, no. Where was the stairs? Empty area, no. Here we are. Go check down here. What here would do? Press play.
Vladimir kneeled and gave a
A
perplexed
bunch
shake
of
of the head.
day.
He lifted himself up and very carefully checked Boris's reflexes, of which he failed most. Then, he carefully removed a thin syringe. The little short jab was enough to rejuvenate Frankenstein's monster as Boris opened his eyes. He looked startled, but not by the fact two strangers were surrounding him. Something else spooked him. You have to take me, he stuttered out. Please, the eyes. But just before he could finish his sentence, his head fell back onto the pillow. His throat pulsated back and forth. His eyes bulged and strained. I saw red veins on the verge of popping open. He gasped for air as Vladimir frantically restrained him to the bed. Then, just as quickly as he had woken up, he calmed and went back to sleep. I looked at Vladimir in disbelief, but before I could utter anything, in the corner of my eye, I saw something. I turned and looked to the doorway of the first chamber. There they were. Victor and Anatoly, standing mute, smiling and staring quietly. They didn't look worried about their comrade's deteriorating condition. They didn't look remotely startled.
Our goal
I
is
tried
to
few direct
take
questions
over
regarding Boris's
every
condition.
single planet. What have life forms on it? Weak species or strong species? It doesn't matter. We're gonna take over every single planet. Even the whole multiverse and megaverse will be ours for the taking. That's our destiny, the Zinyak Empire. Press play.
But again, I was given nothing. In my exasperation, I decided to leave the medical business to Vladimir. As he said, he would run a few more tests on Boris, while Mikhail and I decided to check the rest of Cask Life, which meant we needed to see the nuclear reactor. We still had mission aims to complete. Back in the main chamber, Mikhail had run his own personal diagnosis in the control room, and barring the communications, Cask Life was functioning. He was an expert technician, but even he couldn't salvage that wrecked equipment. We had communications in Villa 2, which we could avail of. He gestured to me and then scurried his way through a connecting tunnel that led into the nuclear reactor room. He called for me to join him. A tight squeeze down the tunnel. I reached Mikhail. The reactor was an impressive technological advancement and took up most space, center of the room. I squeezed past the reactor, around to the far side of the room. It was quite constricting. We're close to the trench, Mikhail said. What? The reactor is placed just beside the trench. I laid my hand on the side. The heat emitting was intense. She was activated. I read the specifications on the side. Isn't this a water reactor, Mikhail? Not a nuclear one? Yes and no. It's a VVER model. Water. But look here. He pointed to the large thin rods shooting up the side. It was fitted with a nuclear component. She shouldn't be active right now. Only the water component should be functioning. See that switchboard behind you, Sergei? Flip the 2 red switches and lower the dial. And let's see if she's at 100%. The room also had portholes surrounding it. Besides the 2 largest portholes was a massive switchboard unlike most I've seen. It was very advanced. It hummed a little song of work. I flipped 2 switches, and the reactor hummed lightly in parallel to the switchboard before green lights at the top sparked up and dimmed. The dial, Sergei. I flipped a 3rd switch, but nothing occurred in the reactor. We stood in solemn silence. Quickly, I realized what I had done before. I had accidentally flipped the switch and not turned a dial. I turned around, and as I saw, the flickering lights outside indicated what the 3rd switch was for. I had accidentally turned the exterior floodlights on. The portholes were now offering insight to the outside world. The trench. Oh my, look at this. I pointed to the outside. The trench was semi-visible. Huge natural walls of rock and a black pool of empty below. We could see across the abyss to the other side of the rock wall. I turned and looked out. I craned my neck and tried to glimpse as much of it as I could. And that's when I saw it. A beautiful underwater ecosystem. My expertise. To see it now was overwhelming. An entire world underneath our own. I looked to see how far down the light managed to go. Then, I saw them. I am almost certain I did. Eyes, yellow and white in the rock face. Thousands of them. Like the lights in the trench, they jittered around the rocks. Then, in an instant, stopped and turned. They were staring right at us. As the floodlights shone brighter, more eyes reflected off of it. Until pitch blackness.
No barn.
Then, in the darkness, sounds of whirling and revving. Blue lights lit up the interior, signaling the emergency generator was engaged. Sounds of whirling and revving. Fuck. Mikhail, did you see that? What? Eyes or something? Something in the trenches. Don't fucking tell me you didn't see it. What? He nudged past me and began tinkering with the dials. A few moments later, the reactor hummed again and the standard lights returned. I lowered the intensity of the floodlights and turned them back on. They were weaker, but could still illuminate the rock face across from us. I looked back out the porthole. Nothing was there. Sergei, it was probably just crystals reflecting light. It happens. No, I know crystals. I am a fucking expert on this, Mikhail. It was something else. Look, being in small chambers this whole mission, it plays on your mind. You see things you don't always see. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I shrugged him off. No, I definitely saw something, Mikhail. I